The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, make sure you guys smash that like button and definitely take the time to subscribe. Now, look, this is the video you've been waiting for. I know this is the one you've been waiting for. People been asking me, BT, when's this video coming out? BT, when you gonna finally drop it? But it's finally here. The unbiased, and yes, I said it, the unbiased, Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant, undisputed prediction / breakdown video. And look, before I proceed any further, let me just say this, man. If you're someone who's a Canelo Alvarez fan, who already has your preconceived notions of what I will or will not say in this video, please do not fucking come to this video and say you're being a hater, because if you know I'm a quote-unquote Canelo hater, you shouldn't be here anyway. So this is your chance to get the fuck out and go to a channel that loves Canelo, or whatever. But this isn't a Canelo fanboy channel. This isn't a Caleb Plant fanboy channel. This is a boxing channel. This is the home of boxing. This is the untouchable True School Sports Empire. So with that being said, let's get into it. So let's get into the breakdown, man. Canelo Alvarez, he comes into this fight recognized by many as the pound for pound #1 fighter in boxing. He's 56 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws, 38 knockouts. Been a professional 15 years. Been in countless world championship fights. He's about as experienced of a fighter you can be on the world class level. So he's got that going for him. He's taking on Caleb Plant, who doesn't have anywhere near that kind of experience. 21 wins, no losses, 12 KOs. Had a extensive amateur background. Had over 117 amateur fights. And if you want to factor in his kickboxing as well, he was a kickboxing champion as well. 117 amateur fights, Golden Glove national champion, has experience of his own. But if we're talking about strictly on the professional level, Caleb Plant don't got the experience Canelo got. So let's get that established first here on True School Sports. It's a big fight, first super middleweight undisputed championship fight. Andre Ward wasn't undisputed, Joe Calzaghe wasn't undisputed, Nigel Benn wasn't undisputed, Chris Eubank wasn't undisputed. Whoever wins this fight will, in my opinion, have superseded those guys as the best super middleweight ever, because they accomplished something that those guys have not accomplished, or at least they could be in the argument to have passed some of those guys. I know Calzaghe was a great fighter, Ward was a great fighter, but big stuff. The fighter who wins this fight is also shooting to become only the fifth active undisputed champion. I mean, you got Josh Taylor, Terrence Crawford, Alexander Usyk, and Teofimo Lopez, who are your other undisputed champions. So, whoever wins this fight's finally catching up to those guys. Let's get that established too, because a lot of people, I think, it's a big undisputed fight, but it's been done before quite a few times in boxing of the active fighters. It's the first time Canelo Alvarez is fighting an undefeated American world champion since he fought Floyd Mayweather. So it's going to be great to see how Canelo performs under those circumstances. He's only ever fought, I believe, 2 undefeated American world champions, Floyd Mayweather and Austin Trout. And he's 1-1 against those fighters. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's his record. Caleb Plant, it's his first time fighting a fighter on the pound for pound list. So we're going to finally see the class of Caleb Plant. So there's definitely a lot to look forward to in this fight. You know what? Let's get into it, man. Let's get into the strengths and weaknesses of both fighters. We're gonna get into that, and then we're gonna go into how that actually, how their styles will mesh, how the fight plays out. So let's start with Canelo, right? Because he's obviously the guy that most people are here to see. He's the reason why this fight is such a big deal. Because a lot of boxing fans, whether you love Canelo or hate Canelo, as polarizing as he can be, we all watch him fight. We can't refute that. We gotta establish Canelo's strengths, man, because I feel like people are exaggerating certain things that happened in his career recently, and we gotta establish just what the hell Canelo Alvarez is. Now, Canelo Alvarez, can he knock you out? Yes. Does Canelo Alvarez have punching power? Yes, but he doesn't have one punching power. He has that methodical power that systematically breaks you down. The kind of power that you need to land shot after shot in place very meticulously to the body and to the head to really have an effect. Is Canelo Alvarez just a flat-footed Mexican fighter? No, he's not. He's flat-footed, yes, but he makes it work for him. He knows how to cut the ring off. He knows how to use that lead hand to get those valuable inches. There's a lot of subtleties that make Canelo a great fighter, a world-class fighter. And we can't hate on him. I know I've said a lot of bad things about him in the past, but leaving all the stuff around his career that I'm not really a fan of. If we just get to the boxing, Canelo Alvarez is a creme de la creme elite fighter. Not as flat-footed as they say he is, but definitely doesn't punch as hard as they say either. I think he's somewhere in the middle. He's a hard, methodical puncher, and he's a flat-footed fighter who can move, who's explosive, who has an explosive lower half of his body, an explosive upper half of his body, and just an explosive fighter in general that makes things work for him. Very smart fighter. Okay, so what are the Canelo's strengths? What does he have? What qualities does he bring to the table that we should be looking forward to? What does he bring to the table? Well, the first thing I think Canelo Alvarez has as far as strengths go is his patience. His patience and his ability to be calm, to not panic when things don't go his way. Because there's been fights in his career where Canelo Alvarez has lost 1, 2, 3 rounds in a row. He's not this unbeatable fighter that doesn't lose a round or doesn't lose 2 rounds. He's had fights where he loses 2, 3, sometimes 4 rounds in a row. But because he's so patient and calm, and he knows he has that professional trait about him where he's able to use the rounds to his benefit, he doesn't rush, he doesn't do any of that stuff. He takes his time and he breaks you down however he sees fit. So patience and calmness, man, it's very, very important for any fighter out there, no matter what level you're at, especially when you get to that world-class level where all the eyes on you, where all the cameras are on you, where there's all that pressure to perform. Patience and calmness is of the utmost important, and he's got that in spades. So if you're Caleb Plant and you're banking on Canelo Alvarez not being patient, not being calm, you got another thing coming to you. One thing I love about Canelo as far as his fighting style goes is, he's not afraid to get off first or punch back after the opponent punches. A lot of time we see fighters, and sometimes even like world champions, like these opponents will get 2, 3, 4 punches off on them, and they don't want to punch back, or they're afraid to punch back. The only time they'll punch is when they initiate the offense. Canelo's not like that. I mean, you can go to any of his fights. If a fighter punches, he punches right back. If a fighter lands, he tries to land right back. He's always got that willingness to try to land back, to try to punch with the opponents and let them know that he's in the fight and that he's gonna move his hands come hell or high water. And that's just these are simple things that seem so simple, and I know from the outside looking in, you're like, well, of course he's supposed to punch back. He's a fighter, but it's easier said than done when the pressure's on. So he's got that about him. These simple things add up. Probably my favorite quality about Canelo Alvarez as a fighter is his confidence as a body puncher. And let me explain what I mean. He's a very confident body puncher, meaning that whether you're moving to your left or moving to your right, he's confident landing a body shot with either hand. Some guys only like to body punch with one hand. So if you're a southpaw fighter, that might be your right hand, or if you're an orthodox fighter, that might be your left hand. But Canelo Alvarez showed, in my opinion, I went back and I watched that Arizona Lara fight this week. He showed in that fight and many other fights that he's very accurate. He's got great timing, and he's confident in landing to the body with both hands. And that, to me, of all his qualities that people talk about, it's not so much his body punching, but it's his confidence in his body punching, the ability to land with the right hand, the ability to land with the left, and do it sometimes when fighters are on the move. Because he did it against Lara, and not too many guys can do it against Lara. Not a lot of guys can have that kind of body punch performance against a guy like Lara at that point in Lara's career. So definitely a great quality to have. And an underrated quality Canelo has, a strength that he has, is that he has the confidence to probe with the jab. Let me explain what I mean. So for those of you who don't know what it means to probe with the jab, it just means if I'm a southpaw, so my lead hand's my right. So if you're boxing, right, probing with the jab is just when you kind of just you flick that lead hand out there, and you're doing it to see how your opponent's going to react. Sometimes you're doing it to move your head out the line. Sometimes you're doing it to set up another punch. But he's very underrated at probing with the jab. His last couple fights, he has had to do it as much. But for example, going back to that Lara fight, this was something that he did regularly there was actually rounds in that fight where he outboxed Lara, particularly the 8th round. He started off probing with that jab a lot, and it got Lara to move where he wanted him to move, and then he was able to time him and go to the body, and then that's where the confidence in his body punching comes into play. So when you look at Canelo Alvarez, is he a complete fighter? Is he a complete fighter all the way around the board? No, I don't think he is, but is he a very well-rounded, balanced fighter with a lot of qualities in the ring? Yes, he is. I think he's fantastic. Canelo's weaknesses. What are Canelo's weaknesses? Well, his weakness in this fight is he likes to fight in a high guard, which means that he's susceptible to body punches, to pot shots. Lara was pot-shotting him a lot. Floyd was pot-shotting him a lot. And for those of you who don't know this terminology, what's a pot shot? A pot shot is simply just when you touch a guy to the stomach. When you touch a guy to the stomach, it don't gotta be a hard punch, but you just kind of touch a guy to the stomach. And this is important because these are scoring punches. These are punches that can add up over time. These are punches that can drop the guard. So like if enough of these pot shots land, it can actually drop the guard of Canelo, and then that's where Caleb Plant can come over the top, and then the quickness of Caleb Plant comes into play. So that's one thing that I think is a weakness for him in this fight. As we've seen in the past, Canelo Alvarez struggles with fighters who can jab and move, a la Mayweather, a la Golovkin, Larry Mosley, Lara. He's struggled, lost, and in some cases should have lost to some of these fighters. Still good. I mean, he's able to parry shots and move, but Canelo is the kind of fighter where he likes to set his feet. He likes to be explosive, and guys that move and box and jab and things like that, these guys don't allow him to set his feet as much, which makes him a less effective fighter than he wants to be. But he's been getting better. Another weakness that nobody seems to talk about of Canelo is his stamina. Canelo Alvarez hasn't really been pushed in a long time. Canelo Alvarez, I remember very clearly in the first Golovkin fight, he was huffing and puffing, about to blow the house down like the big bad wolf, very tired. And since that fight, if you look at the fighters he's fought, since the Golovkin fights, if you look at the fighters he's fought, even going to Billy Joe, these are all fighters that they're not known for having high punch outputs. Yildirim, not a high punch output fighter. And even if Yildirim was, Yildirim's has leaky defense. But for the most part, Rocky Fielding, not a high punch output. Was it Saunders, Smith? These guys aren't the kind of fighters that will throw more than 1 or 2 shots in a combination. That's just not who they are. And they're not the kind of fighters that, aside from Saunders, everybody aside from Saunders, they're not the kind of fighters that can get on their back foot and move. But Saunders, very ABC 1, 2, 3 fighter, good at what he does, but you're only going to get 2 punches at most in a combination from him. You're not going to get 3 or 4 or 5 punches from him. What makes Saunders such a good fighter is more so his head movement and his ability to make you reset. But Canelo Alvarez is such an experienced professional that he can overcome that style, So that's why I picked him to win that fight. But yeah, that will be a problem. Stamina, I think if Plant is able to get him into those later rounds, it could be a problem. It hasn't been tested in quite some time. Weaknesses for Canelo, being honest, piss poor track record against undefeated American fighters, going back to it, he had the fight with Mayweather. We know what happened there. He got absolutely schooled, and he looked like a C-class fighter against an old Floyd. Nothing wrong with that, but that's what happened. We can't ignore that. And then, Austin Trout. Austin Trout was probably, to me, the pinnacle of his career, the best win of his career, because he was a southpaw, undefeated American world champion, a guy that wasn't too far removed for beating a Miguel Cotto. Probably one of the best wins that I can't really criticize at Canelo. A really good win for him. But, I feel like when people classify the style of Caleb Plant, there's been a lot of irresponsible analysis. People want to say like he's like Mayweather and all that stuff. He's not Mayweather, because I don't think defensively he's as good as Floyd, and I don't think the Mayweather that Canelo fought punched as much in a combination as Floyd. Floyd had mastered defense and distance when Canelo fought him. That version of Floyd, the 36-year-old version. The version of Caleb Plant that's fighting Canelo is a guy that has shown in recent fights that he'll triple up on jabs, quadruple up on jabs if you let him, throw 4 or 5 punch combinations, throw these little hybrid punches where he fakes into a hook, turns it into a jab at the last second, or turns a left hook, or turns a right hand into a right hook at the last second. He does these kind of things. And these aren't the things that Floyd did, so that they have their differences about him, but there are some similarities in terms of Plant style and the other style, but I wouldn't say they're the same fighter. That's irresponsible. Even though I like Caleb Plant and it'd be nice to see him win, that's not what I'm getting at with him. But let's get to Caleb Plant, because I feel like he's bringing a lot of strengths to this fight that people aren't talking about, and I want to get to that. Now, first and foremost, I think Caleb Plant's one of his biggest strengths is his creativity that I just mentioned earlier. He can turn punches. He can start a combination or end a combination throwing a punch and turn it into another punch at the last second. So, for example, I'll give you an example. If you go watch Caleb Plant, I think it was his 12th or 13th professional fight against Carlos Galvan, he'll feint with the right hook, and then he'll come back and he'll throw a left hook at the last second. You know, he can start a combination off showing you one punch and end it with a different punch on the opposite hand. You know, and Canelo can do that too. But Plant is someone that has that quality that I don't hear anybody talk about. He throws these hybrid punches, and he's able to have these real creative feints, and you know, sometimes he'll reverse the combinations. You might start a combination throwing a jab, right hand, left hook, and then he might come back with the next combination and throw a left hook, jab, and then a right hand. You know, he's very good about mixing things up. So that shows that creative quality that he has in the ring, and that's credit to him. You know, I think he's got another quality. I think another strength he has, I think, is his blend of athleticism. You know, his ability to move, slip, change cadences, change his rhythms, double jab, double up on right hands, pivot around you, control the center of the ring, hold the center of the ring. You know, these things, the athletic abilities of Caleb Plant, coupled and blended together with the fundamentals, you know, the ability to not fall off balance on your punches and things like that, that makes him a dangerous fighter, because I don't think Canelo has fought a guy with the blend of athletic ability and the blend of boxing fundamentals that Caleb Plant has. You know, and I feel like with him, he had an extensive amateur career. He won the national Golden Gloves, as he said in the press conference. He beat Jerry Odom, the boogeyman of the amateurs. Had 117 amateur fights, so he had that good foundation and good fundamentals as a boxer. But I think where the creativity comes into play is from when he was actually a kickboxer. Because if you guys don't know, Caleb Plant was like one of the youngest like kickboxing champions ever. You know, he won a bunch of kickboxing titles and whatnot. And he was a very good kickboxer. So the kickboxing and the angles you have to have for kickboxing, I think that's where the creativity comes from. And I think the fundamentals come from his amateur background. You know what I'm saying? Now, one quality that Caleb Plant doesn't get credit for, and I feel like people are overlooking this fact about him, is his durability. You know, Caleb Plant is a durable fighter, and you might say, well, BT, how can you say these things? You know, he got clipped against Caleb Truax, and imagine if Canelo lands those punches and this, that, and the third. But look, he got clipped on the chin, right on the chin by Caleb Truax. And I don't care how hard or who a fighter is, at the world-class championship level of boxing, if a fighter clips you on the chin the way Truax did, and you can take it, that's credit to you. It means you have a solid beard, you have a solid chin, you have durability. Same thing goes for Jose Uzcategui. You know, Jose Uzcategui was a fighter that can punch really hard, was not too far removed from stopping Durrell, and he came on strong on. He caught a great second win in the last half of that fight, and Caleb Plant was able to weather the storm and still find enough in his locker to outbox him. You know what I'm saying? And then even going back to when Caleb Plant fought Porky Medina. Porky Medina's a fighter that obviously he's not as talented as Canelo. He's not as good as Canelo, but some of the ways he stalks his opponents around the ring is there's some similarities to Canelo, and that was actually one of Caleb Plant's best fights. And he kept coming, and he was tough. And Caleb Plant stayed composed. He didn't get tired, and he showed that he was well conditioned enough to outbox and outclass Porky Medina for 12 rounds. And I thought he beat him better than Benavidez. So durability is a strength. It's not a weakness of Caleb Plant. It's a strength of Caleb Plant's, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And the only way it won't be a strength of Caleb Plant's is if Canelo makes it not a strength of Caleb Plant and he breaks him down early. So that's gonna be on Canelo. That's why Canelo Alvarez. We'll get to that later on. And then the last strength I have for Caleb Plant is his consistency. You know, a lot of people want to criticize the resume of Plant, but and people do that all the time with other fighters, not just Plant. They do it with Canelo, they do it with Plant, they do it with Trout, they do it with Floyd, they do it with De La Hoya. It don't matter what level you're at. Boxing fans will always find some way to criticize your resume. So I'm not really into all that. What I'm more into when I look at a fighter, no matter who they fight, is their level of performance, their level of consistency, because a lot of fighters, they fight up and down to the level of their competition. You know, some fighters may be great against the best fighters in the world, but you put them there against somebody who's inferior, and they fight to that level, and they put themselves in dangerous positions. It's only the select few. There's only a select few fighters that fight at that elite level and don't have any drops in their performances, and that's like Chocolatito Gonzalez, Gael Estrada, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd. You could even throw Canelo in there, but you know what? I'm gonna throw Caleb Plant in there because and Demetrius Andre. You know, I'm gonna throw Caleb Plant in there because I really feel like the Truax fight. I've gone back and I've watched it quite a few times. I feel like that performance is unfairly criticized because people take a couple of moments and they criticize the whole 12-round performance. A boxing match is 12 rounds, not just 1 or 2 or 3 moments. And if you look at the totality of that fight, he won about 9 to 10 rounds, outboxed Truax easily, had him leaking from the nose with just a jab. It was a good, not a great performance, not his best performance, but a very good performance. He doesn't lose many rounds consecutively. You might take a round from him here or there, but Caleb Plant's not one of these fighters where he's shown himself to lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds in a row. You know, Canelo has in the past, but not Caleb Plant. So I feel like these things get overlooked because people want to pick out a couple moments, and it's the same thing that goes for Canelo. They do the same with Canelo. So those are his strengths. Now, his weaknesses, we can't ignore the weaknesses of Caleb Plant because, gosh darn it, he do got them. First weakness for Caleb Plant is, his lack of big fight experience. He's been on some big undercards. He did fight the MGM Grand on the Pacquiao Thurman undercard, but nothing like this. This is a whole another animal. This is when you got your face plastered all over the MGM Grand and all over Las Vegas, and you got more media obligations, and it's draining. These things can weigh on a fighter. So I feel like we're gonna see how mentally tough Caleb Plant is because, man, lack of big fight experience is a motherfucker, man. It's an MF. It's truly an MF. And I really feel like maybe this could be one of the things that is ultimate undoing. You know what I'm saying? It is something to be wary of, But lack of big fight experience has killed many fighters in the past, and it could be something that is a problem for Caleb Plant. Plant's weaknesses: hand problems. He's got hand problems. That's been noted. He's had a period of inactivity because of the hand problems. He got surgery on his hand. He got brittle hands. It is a fact. Doesn't mean he can't fight. Doesn't mean he's still not a threat to Canelo, but he does have hand problems. And I could see this being a situation where if, let's just say, Canelo's pouring it on him, or maybe he blocks the punch and Canelo hits him on the hand the wrong way, or if he rolls a shot the wrong way, or if he lands a punch and don't turn it over properly, maybe those hand problems could flare up for him in this fight, and that could be a thing that plays to the advantage of Canelo Alvarez. Obviously, as many people have pointed out, another weakness of Caleb Plant is that he cuts easily. He was cut in the Jose Uzcategui fight. He was cut at the press conference when they got in each other's face, and Canelo kind of mushed his glasses towards his face, and that cut is still there. So if Canelo's able to land in that spot early in the fight, could be a good advantage for Canelo. So he gets cut easily, got hand problems. There's some things that are going in the favor of Canelo Alvarez. And then I would say, to the biggest weakness that he's shown in his last fight was that he can, as defensively sound as he is, and as quick as he is, and as good as his feet are, and as good as and creative as a fighter he is, Caleb Plant can get hit with big shots. He can. We saw Truax land a straight right hand on the chin, an overhand right to the temple last fight, and it wasn't Caleb Plant's best night at the office. So if you're Caleb Plant, you got to really tighten up on those things because you cannot let Canelo Alvarez hit you with those same shots. Obviously, different fighters bring out different attributes. There's different variables in different fights, but I'm just saying he has shown in the past that he can get hit with a big shot, and he has to keep that to a minimum in this fight. Not because Canelo Alvarez is this big one-punch artist, because he's not that. That's a misconception. He needs to do that because the more of those he gets hit with, the more that's going to drain him and get his stamina lower, and the more that's going to have to make him fight Canelo and set his feet. And you need to keep Canelo Alvarez from setting his feet to a minimum, because if you don't, you're in big trouble and your ass is grass. Okay, so those are the strengths and weaknesses of both fighters. I hope you guys thought that was fair. We're going to get to what are some factors that you guys should consider going into this fight with how it will play out, and then we'll get to how it plays out. I know it's a long video, but hey, you guys wanted this, I'm giving it to you. So other factors, what are the other factors that could play out that you guys, the boxing fans, the boxing viewers, should consider when you watch this fight? Okay, well, the first factor you must consider is that this is a PBC promoted card. And why is that important? Because boxing, whether you like it or not, is a business masqueraded as a sport, and you got to always follow the money. And Canelo Alvarez is not a PBC fighter. Canelo Alvarez is a fighter who has signed a one-fight deal with PBC. Now, unless there's some sort of background deal that we don't know about where Canelo has signed to Al Heyman and PBC long term, you have to think that this is a thing that goes in the favor of Caleb Plant, because Caleb Plant is a fighter that PBC has poured a lot of money into, building him up, putting him on undercards, and Canelo's in his house, whether you like it or not. He's in his house, and it's the facts. It's the facts of the matter. I know Al Heyman has Dave Benavidez, but really and truthfully, unless there's some sort of deal in the background that we don't know about, where Canelo is signing for another deal with PBC, Plant is Al Heyman's only leverage in the super middleweight division, and they've paid Canelo a nice amount of money, so it's not far-fetched that if this fight does go to the cards, that Caleb Plant, if he earns it and if the fight is close enough, could get a decision. I know that sounds crazy because of the history of Canelo, but you got to consider that. This is a PBC card. This is Al Heyman's only leverage at 168. And one thing I've always said, and I'll continue to say, when it comes to any Al Heyman promoted fighter, for good, bad, or indifferent, is that you can never, ever underestimate the power of Al Heyman. And I'll leave it at that. Now, let's get to what you guys have been waiting for. Now that we got everything established, how does this fight play out? How will it play out Saturday night when we see Canelo Alvarez across the ring for Caleb Plant as they square out for the first ever 168-pound super middleweight championship fight of all time? Well, I think this fight plays out. The way it plays out is all dependent on the first 4 rounds. I think the first 4 rounds for both fighters is of great importance. For Canelo, he can't really. He's probably the more interesting one of the two. Because Canelo Alvarez is known as a slow starter, but I don't think Caleb Plant's the kind of fighter that you can afford to get off to a slow start against. He's the kind of fighter that when he gets into a rhythm and he puts around 2, 3, 4 in a bank and he gets into that zone, or as these psychologists and these scientists would say, when he gets into that flow state where everything's just moving perfectly for him and he's not really thinking, he's not really a fighter you want to be in there with. So I feel like Canelo Alvarez has to break his will and spirit early in the fight. And Canelo might understand this, and he might press forward. And that's what makes the fight interesting. Caleb Plant, to me, he needs to put these first 4 to 6 rounds in the bank. He needs to win as much of the first 6 rounds as possible, because Canelo has even acknowledged to himself, he believes that this will be a fight where he starts off kind of slow, which I don't think he can, but he said it will. He thinks this is a fight where he's going to come in that boxing ring and he's going to be patient and show his maturation as a pro and stop Caleb Plant. And that could be a problem for Canelo. And this is why I think it could be. I think Canelo, based on the way he's talking, based on how angry he is, and based on the point he's trying to prove, I really feel like Canelo Alvarez is trying to win this undisputed title, become the first Mexican undisputed champion in grand style. And I feel like he's been training specifically for a knockout, And that could be to his ultimate detriment, because he might go in there just throwing these hard shots, loading up, missing. And if anybody who knows anything about boxing, if the more you miss these big shots, anybody who sparred, if you've been in that boxing ring and you fought a slick fighter who can make you miss shots, big shots, these things take a lot out of you, and it's hard to keep coming for 12 rounds. So I feel like, the first 4 rounds are very key. And, I had this theory that Canelo Alvarez has been training for a knockout, and only for a knockout, not for 12 rounds. And that could be to his ultimate detriment, because if that's the case, then I feel like he'll be loading up with a lot of shots early, and he won't have that stamina in the back half of the fight. And he's going to find out when it's too late. But, the first 4 rounds, I truthfully think Canelo Alvarez will try to press Caleb Plant. I see him pressing Caleb Plant, not in a wild fashion, but in a fashion where you see him probing with that jab, and you see kind of Caleb Plant getting on that bicycle, picking and choosing when he wants to exchange. And you know what? I want to get to this. So like a lot has been made in the Caleb Plant camp about how Andre Ward has been helping him, right? And anybody who watched Andre Ward's career knows that one thing Andre Ward was great at in his career was that he was able to fight in the ring. Like in the course of a 3-minute round, Andre Ward was a master at fighting when he decided to fight. There'd be some times where Andre Ward was boring and didn't fight for a minute and a half or 2 minutes of the round, and in the last minute, he out muscles his opponent and dominates the round, and he gets that round. And like a lot of times there'd be fighters, like I'll give you an example, like Kovalev, right? Sergey Kovalev or Chad Dawson. These guys had the reputation for being bigger punchers coming into the fight, right? and they would be training for a boxer, and they would get that for about a minute and a half of the round, and before you know it, you had Andre Ward slipping inside, hitting him with hard, sharp shots, dropping him and hurting him, And I think Caleb Plant has that same quality to him. Canelo Alvarez is training for a boxer. He's training for a guy with a good jab. But Caleb Plant, with the help of Andre Ward, just the tips of Andre Ward, I feel like you're going to get that same thing. Because the same thing, that was the case with Uzcategui. Caleb Plant dictated the fight. He fought when he wanted to fight. He boxed when he wanted to fight. And Uzcategui trained for a boxer, but ultimately he got a complete, well-rounded fighter who became a slugger at some points and sat him on his ass. So Plant has the same quality to him too, and I feel like that's what Ward's been telling him. Ward's been telling him, you don't got to fight for all 3 minutes of the round, because that's what Canelo wants. Pick and choose when you want to fight. Be the ring general. Use your legs. Use your ability to pivot. Use the ring. And make Canelo have to come find you, and you just be that creative, sharp fighter that God created you to be. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's what Ward's been telling him. Now, can Plant make Canelo respect him as far as punching power? Because that for people that aren't giving him a chance, because I think he's like a 7-1 underdog. For people that aren't giving Caleb Plant a chance in this fight, the main narrative being pushed out there is that he doesn't have the power to keep Canelo off of him. And I don't think that's the case. I think Caleb Plant, he's not like a hard one-punch knockout artist, but he's a guy that in his career he's shown that with his speed and creativity, he can hit you with shots you don't see, and those are the most dangerous shots. His punches get from point A to point B very quickly. So I don't think he's a Golovkin strong, but he's more dangerous than Golovkin in the fact that his punches get from point A to point B quicker. His punches are quick and they're sharp. And those fighters are more dangerous. Floyd Mayweather wasn't a big puncher, but he had that same quality that Caleb Plant has, which is that he is a sharp puncher, and those sharp punches can keep a fighter off you. You know what I'm saying? So I think he can get the respect of Canelo. Now, can Canelo dictate the action? That's the question of this fight for Canelo, and I think he can. I think Canelo Alvarez is smart enough of a fighter to manipulate Caleb Plant to part the ring that he wants him to get him to those corners, to get him to the ropes. And he's shown that in the past with Lara. A slick fighter, doesn't have the punch output of a Caleb Plant, but a slick fighter with great footwork who can pivot and shift around that ring like no other at that point in his career. And he was able to, I thought was probably one of his most underrated performances. I don't think Lara beat Canelo, to be honest with you. I think Canelo showed some great body punching with both hands. He showed the ability to break him down, press forward, and had him. I hate to say it, man, but there were some rounds where he was running. Like, he was kind of running. He was boxing well, but he was running too, because he wasn't really getting anything off. And Canelo was throwing more punches than him. The question also becomes, because like I've said, Caleb Plant has proven in his career, whether you want to criticize the opposition or not, he's been a consistent fighter. He's not a fighter that loses more than a round at a time, maybe two at most, but he's a fighter that wins rounds consecutively a lot. Canelo Alvarez is a guy that in the Lara fights he's lost rounds in a row. In the Golovkin fight he's lost rounds in a row. In the Floyd fight he lost damn near all the rounds, if not all the rounds. So my thing is this: if Caleb Plant does, let's say Caleb Plant puts 3, 4, 5 rounds in the bank, the first 3, 4, 5 rounds in the bank, does that discourage Canelo? Does he throw wide shots? Does he deviate from the game plan? Does he just go for the knockout because that's what he's been training for in the first place? Does the pressure of becoming the first Mexican undisputed champion get to him? These are the questions that I feel like people aren't asking. And I could see it playing out where Canelo Alvarez is losing round after round after round, and then I feel like when he wins a round, like I'll tell you this, when Canelo does win a round in this fight, I feel like he'll win the round in a dominant fashion. He won't get a knockout, but he'll win it in a dominant fashion. But then Caleb Plant will just get back to doing what he was doing, So I could see a scenario where Canelo Alvarez can get discouraged and does get off track, and he will need a knockout. So what's the final verdict? What's the final verdict here on True School Sports? Now that I've given you guys 34 minutes of insight in my breakdown, my final verdict is that Canelo Alvarez, for as good as he is, and for as experienced as he is, and for as great of a fighter as he is, he's never fought anyone, and that includes Floyd. He's never fought anyone in his career with the combination of size, athleticism, speed, skills, creativity, and self-belief like a Caleb Plant. And the way I think the fight's going to play out is I think Canelo Alvarez will start slow. He'll start too slow. I think Caleb Plant is going to establish that jab early. He's going to make Canelo Alvarez look silly in the first couple rounds. He's going to be pivoting around him, showing himself to be this fighter where, yes, you can be training for a boxer, but then he might slip inside, hit you with a 1-2 reverse pivot to the right, and you find out that he's more than just a boxer. He's more than just a guy that has the American amateur style, that he's a guy that has the true American style. You know, the American style that guys like Marlon Starlin, James Toney, guys like that had. You know, he has those things about him. And I feel like it's gonna I feel like in this fight, Canelo Alvarez is gonna kind of play this fight like he did the Saunders fight. The only difference is I don't think he'll find his rhythm because, you know, Plant has the attribute of being physically stronger, being full-fledged as a super middleweight, and being able to throw combinations from different angles, and these things will trouble Canelo. He will not be able to set his feet. He will get discouraged. He might even get buzzed or hurt. I think Caleb Plant is capable of hurting him and buzzing him. And I don't think he's going to stop him. I think he's going to outbox him 116-112, 8 rounds to 4. I think he wins 4 of the first 6 rounds, and I think he banks 4 of the last 6 rounds. Which of the 4 or which of those first 6 and which of those last 6, I don't know. But I think he's winning 4 of the first 6 and 4 of the last 6, which will give him a score of 116-112, 8-4. Canelo Alvarez, a really good fighter, but truthfully, look, everybody's heaping all this praise, all this hype on him of how he's gotten better as a fighter and all this stuff, and how he's rectified these problems from the Floyd fight, from the Lara fights, from the Golovkin fights, and I don't see it, man. I truthfully don't see it. I feel like his whole run at 168, he's picked the easiest opponents, the most style-friendly opponents for him. Not to say that Canelo Smith and Billy Joe Saunders weren't quality fighters, because they were. They got the belts. They were undefeated when Canelo fought them, so they did have some quality. But he picked those guys first for a reason, because if he would have picked this guy first, it might have been to his ultimate detriment. He might not have ever become a super middleweight world champion. You know what I'm saying? So that's why he picked Caleb Plant last, because it's the most difficult, and that's why he's been the most angry this press conference, because here with Caleb Plant, you got a fighter that isn't going in there just hoping he can win, just handing the belt to Canelo. No, this is a guy that in his heart of heart, into the core of his very being, not only does he think he can beat Canelo, he thinks he can school Canelo. And that's to even have that to even think that against a fighter like Canelo, that takes a different mentality. So yeah, Canelo Alvarez, he never fought anybody to rectify those problems against Floyd, against Lara, against Larry Mosley, against these guys. And look, if I'm wrong, I'll come back and I'll humble myself and I'll say, you know what? Canelo Alvarez has shown a lot of maturation as a fighter, and he's really shown himself to be of extra quality tonight. And he'll get some credit from me, and I'll be happy to give it to him, because Caleb Plant's a damn good fighter, and Canelo's a damn good fighter too. But I really feel like this fight to me is his test to see if he's graduated against boxing a fighter like Caleb Plant. I know people might say, well, he fought Daniel Jacobs, but Daniel Jacobs, he's a ABC 1-2-3 fighter. Doesn't really have a lot of creativity in those combinations, and doesn't really have the best master of distance. He's not the best master of distance either. Good fighter, good quality fighter. Can't take that from Canelo. It was a great win, but even in that fight, Canelo got tired towards the end. Won it easily, but got tired towards the end. Jacobs just doesn't have that extra gear. I feel like Plant, he has the extra gear, and Canelo gonna find out come Saturday night, November the 6th, and he gonna find out when the rest of you Canelo fanboys find out, when it's too late. So, I've been high on Caleb Plant since he was a prospect. I'll continue to be high on him throughout his whole career, and I'll be high on him now. I got Caleb Plant 116-112 in a beautiful decision. He really proves the world wrong, shocks the world, and he shows everybody out there that resumes don't win fights, skills win fights, styles make fights, resumes can't win the fights, and that you can't discredit a fighter's resume just because you can't just discredit what Caleb Plant's done because of Canelo's resume. Okay, we know he doesn't have Canelo's resume, but very few fighters in boxing have Canelo's resume, because very few fighters have 59 professional fights. The guy's been professional for 15 years, so he's got some wear and tear in his body, and he's had a lot of experience. And he better have one of the best resumes in boxing. If you've been a professional at that level for 15 years, you better have one of the best resumes in boxing. But either way, you cut it up, slice it, and dice it. It's gonna be a momentous occasion here on True School Sports. Saturday night, Big fight for boxing. Hope you guys tune in and just continue to watch the coverage here on the channel for that fight. I got some special things planned. And yeah, man. Canelo Alvarez, Caleb Plant, gonna be a great one for the books. But that's my prediction. Caleb Plant, 116, 112 UD. Canelo Alvarez is training for a knockout, and he's training for a boxer. But he's gonna find out that Caleb Plant is much more than just a boxer, and he's gonna find out when it's too late that you can't be disrespecting Caleb Plant's skills, and you can't be here underestimating him. So we'll see. Come find out what happens. But I'm going with Caleb Plant to show Canelo Alvarez and the Mexican fans once again that America runs boxing, and that he will give Canelo Alvarez PTSD of fighting Floyd Mayweather. So with that being said, you guys have a blessed day. Give me your comments down below. And like I say in every single one of these videos, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just kidding from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.